experts are ready to discuss this topic, so I will not be talking too much. And I would like to welcome them right on stage. First, let's welcome the moderator for this partner for next year, Emeka Okpukpara. Please, with a round of applause, let's have him on stage. Thank you. Okay, joining him on stage is the only woman on the panel today, and she's Sherry Adegbenro. She's the Chief Audit and Compliance Officer at the Eco Electricity Distribution PLC. Please, let's welcome her. It seems we're a bit cold. It can be louder. Thank you. Okay, also on the panel, we have Mohammed Mijindadi. He's the President, Nigeria, and Managing Director, Gas Power Systems New Unit, Anglophone and Francophone Africa at GE Vernova. Please, let's welcome him. Thank you. Also on the panel this morning is Dantala Wright, is the Commercial Gas Advisor at the Gas Aggregation Company Nigeria Limited. Please, you're welcome. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you. Please, if you need to use the restroom, it's just down the hall to your right. And if you have any questions, you can meet anyone at the registration table. Please enjoy the session. Over to you, our moderator. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Thank you, Blessing, for those introductions. I know where the room is not quite full, but at the firm, we have an obsession with starting things on time and ending on time. So we understand that the panelists came far and wide to be here, and we want to value your time. So thank you for joining us, and the room will fill up. If it doesn't, we'll have our conversation and move forward. So thank you for joining. So let's start with just quick introductions about maybe just an opening statement about the topic at hand. And it doesn't have to be a 20-minute address, just a couple minutes to get started. Why don't we start with Sherry?
Okay, you need me to introduce myself again? No.
Just the
topic, right? Yeah. Okay, I mean, for me, if you understand my background, I am really into sustainability. And with this particular topic of gas flaring, right? If you look at both from the ESG side and sustainability, it touches on so many aspects of it. From ESG, you know, yes, the most prominent one that touches on environment, but even there's a social factor there that it touches on. There's even a governance factor it touches on. When you even look from the SDG side, right, that's Sustainable Development Goals side, touches on about 7 to 8, if not more, direct and indirect goals. And if you now break those down, you see that it actually touches our entire livelihood, the entire life cycle, community, us humans, planet. It touches on everything. So it is a very important topic that we need to face and tackle, no matter how hard it is. And I think it's important that at least this dialogue is taking place. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mo, over to you.
I don't know if you guys can hear. Okay, I think you can. Hi, Mohammed Mijindadi again. I'm actually excited about the conversation that we're having this morning. So the vantage point that I view is slightly different. So I work for a power company that manufactures gas turbines. This is always an ongoing joke every time we're having these conversations in a global setting, just around what is the problem. You guys in Nigeria, you guys in Africa, there is a clear need for power, yet you guys are not able to solve this problem. And it's always a bit embarrassing because these are the same sorts of conversations that we've had for year on year, and it doesn't appear that there's any clear path to solving it. I think when I think about the issue around the opportunities that are lost, apart from pollution in the regions just by indiscriminate flaring, I think it's really around the economic opportunities lost. I mean, these are molecules, if processed the right way, could serve multiple purposes, apart from providing instant power to the regions in which these sites are located. There is gas that could be provided and that provide electricity to other parts of the region. I mean, these gas molecules could be commercialized either through compressed gas that could be sold locally or international. So there is a phenomenal economic loss that this conversation, or the lack of solving this conversation, sits on. So that's what comes to mind. That's part of the interest for me. Again, like I said, there's a social aspect, there's an economic aspect, but then there's also a moral responsibility aspect. And I'm really hoping, even if we don't solve the problem today, at least these conversations will stimulate the sorts of actions that lead to better recourse. Thank you.
Thank you. Chancellor?
Thank you for having me here again. So gas flaring is not just an environmental challenge, but also a wasted economic opportunity. So over here, we just look forward to looking how we can see the infrastructural gaps and also how we can unlock. We're also looking forward to seeing how we can unlock our full potential. Thank you.
Awesome. So we have some questions prepared, but just so we set the context and set the stage, we have 4 objectives we're trying to accomplish with this dialogue. First is to analyze the infrastructure gaps that sustain gas flaring across Nigeria. Second is to evaluate the effectiveness of the ongoing policies. Third is identify scalable and modular private sector driven gas infrastructure solutions. The last is to propose and proffer actionable recommendations for closing the infrastructure gap in Nigeria. So those are the 4 main objectives we're hoping to accomplish with this session. So to start off with, Mo, GE Vernova operates at the intersection of technology and infrastructure. From your vantage point, how critical is Nigeria's flare to power opportunity for addressing our obvious energy poverty? And that's over to you, Mo.
It's still on. Okay, perfect. So just picking up on the intro, again, I think that intersection is very important. So we're a country, I mean, depending on who you ask, we could say we're 250 million, 200 million. The availability and access to power is still at best 50%, right? And let me say grid dependent power is still about 50%. The amount of flare gas today is at least in the terms of maybe 300 billion cubic feet of gas that is being flared. If we're able to harness that, again, like I had mentioned, it goes a significant way in solving some of the power issues that we have. A big problem that we have beyond just getting power to people is also finding these molecules. And we do have molecules available. It's just that we do not have the right sort of investment in the sort of technology that is able to harness, capture this gas, process this gas, store this gas, transport this gas, and be able to be used responsibly in the context of generating power. So the intersection for me is that solving gas flaring has a direct impact into improving the availability of power if utilized correctly. And really, this is where I think there is a great intersection between government that is supposed to be a policy and regulatory arm in managing this, and we who sit in the private sector, either as investors or developers. Now, I don't believe this is a solution or a bridge that is going to be solved by one entity, but I think the ability for all of us to really think critically on how to do this, it makes it easy to be able to think about lasting solutions. Again, like I had mentioned, we sit as a company in one of the value streams in creating this power availability to the people. And I see the frustrations from multiple developers, So that for me, from my vantage point, is where I feel if solved, that bridge in creating the gas through power would be able to at least solve the bigger problem of power availability and generation. generation.
That's really interesting. So the developers you deal with, what's your biggest challenge when it comes to the policies around gas flaring?
Well, I think it's not necessarily policy of gas flaring. So when you look at your average thermal developer, there are a few things that they're looking for, right? So after they get their land and all the necessary licenses, they need to go out in the market to go and procure gas to be able to be utilized in their generating plants. Most of the time, they have to compete with the global market for availability of molecules. You know, so beyond just the availability of gas, there's a pricing issue. If there was a lot of gas, especially considering locations where most of these assets are trying to be built, it makes it a lot easy from a pricing standpoint, from the logistics of getting this gas to be able to be used, you know, and then obviously being able to be processed. So there are multiple, I wouldn't say there's one issue, there are multiple issues pending on the developers that you speak to. And it all spans from first getting the availability, second, getting the right pricing, and then third, getting the logistics of even transporting this gas at the right price to be able to have a commercial viable business in providing power. So those are a few of multiple problems within that gas space for developers.
Interesting. Dantala, just from a GACN's perspective, you guys are supposed to be the folks that gather gas for the country, right?
Supposed to be
You're supposed to gather gas, right? You aggregate gas.
we facilitate transactions, yeah.
You facilitate transactions. So that point of view of gas flaring, what's the organization's policies around that?
So if I go to the question you had asked, so the position, so like for example, the wellheads, you have brownfields and marginal fields that lack the gas gathering facilities to that enable flare. You also have pockets of different sites also that technically it's easy to you can harness. However, it doesn't necessarily for an operator it doesn't make commercial sense to utilize these sites. Then from the processing side of it, you have a limited number of processing plants around your flare sites. So also with that again, how do you also clean your gas because it's not pipeline ready per se, even in that state. So off-spec requires treatment. Then also you look at the transmission. The national, like the pipeline grid, it still remains incomplete. So you then look at other ways to evacuate it would be either CNG or other mini energy solutions or just trucking. So it's not that operators want to do this. However, it's just that the enabling infrastructure is what makes it this way.
Interesting. All right. So, but I guess when we hear gas flaring, we don't quite think about how it ties down to the distribution end, Sherry. But I'm sure there are issues down that value chain, right?
Am I on? Yes, thank you. Yes, that, you know, when we sit in the boardroom, right? We're not necessarily thinking gas flaring. However, what we're thinking is we want more electricity, right? Because when we get more electricity, we're able to actually get it to the end users. Now, since we're one of the highest discos in Nigeria, we're thinking the entire value chain. Where are the gaps, where are the pocket of issues, and what can we do? How can we get to sit at the table to ensure that things are kind of fixed? So we get, now, Mo spoke about, you know, from the economic standpoint, it is true. When that issue of gas flaring is resolved, we are able to get more electricity because, of course, through the pipelines, it gets to the GENCOs. GENCOs do what they need to do and provide it to us. Yes, we do have a mandate, you know, for that energy mix. And we know that, I mean, renewables is great and all that. And we're all working towards it even before, you know, the regulators kind of put the act in place. But irrespective of that, we understand gas as even that transition fuel. We need it, it's here to stay within even what we provide. It's here to stay and we need it. So where we are able to even bridge with, you know, the electricity, the transition plan, the energy transition plan, and actually make it a proper mix it is actually just not only going to make it beneficial for everyone, but it makes economic sense to make sure that this thing works and the flaring kind of reduces, of course, not today, not tomorrow, but at least we kind of map out a pathway where it reduces and eventually actually that routine gas flaring stops. It helps everyone. I mean, if you look at our tariffs, right, is based on bands. I mean, right now, for the past 2-3 years or so, we've actually been very grateful that now it's more cost reflective. At least the model is more cost reflective. So when you look at even any investor that actually looks at even the tariff plan, you see band A. Band A, you say 20 hours. Band E, you say 4 hours. Any investor, forget about the investors, right? Anybody that sits at that table and looks at it, you want to push everybody in band E up to band A. It's more money for you. Even when you do the little plus and minus, it's more money for you. Who wouldn't want to do that? So in terms of even sitting and saying, how can we even do that? We need to make sure that even there are gaps within our sector as well, within our our space, our franchise area. We need to fix that, but also see within the value chain what needs to be fixed in order to make sure that we the downstream are able to produce and provide what the commodity that we need to give to the end users. So so yes, it's not something in our forefront when we're talking at the table, but it's something that we must fix because at the end we gain from it tremendously.
No, that makes sense. Mo, just wanted to follow up on what you said earlier around the commercial aspects of the GE Vernova work. And you guys, I think you guys have about 60% of the thermal turbines in Nigeria.
I'd like to say more, but yes, I think 60 is a fair
number.
Is a fair assessment. Yeah.
Okay. All right. You guys have done that around most of the NIPPs and a few of the other plants, but those are very large, right?
Yeah.
What about the small modular plant turbines?
Yeah.
Do you have those in country? And is there possibility to link those up to sites where they're flaring gas to be able to actually capture the gas and use it?
Yeah, no, I think maybe I should do a bit of a roundhouse on just the sort of business that we're in.
Sure.
So you are right. We play predominantly in the thermal generating space, but it's not the only business that we have. I think GE has about 12 different power portfolios that span the renewable space. We're very active in wind. We're active in nuclear. We're active in steam. We obviously have the thermal business. It's really large. Now, in the thermal space, our business model has changed over the years. There was a period where we played in the very the lower power space. We had turbines that were generating anything from about 3 megawatts. So we had acquired a company called Yambaka, and they used to have much lower capacity turbines. Those were very handy in small applications, so small industrial applications and all the likes. Over the years, I think GE has sort of morphed. So we've let go of some businesses and concentrated on others. The thermal capacity that we play now is everything from 30 megawatts and above. Now, if I take your question a little notch further, this idea on how can we help, what sorts of concepts can be used, we had worked on an exercise, I think, between GE. I think we had gotten Shell at some point. This was during the Yaradua Goodluck Jonathan administration. And we were thinking about if we really wanted to try to tackle this gas flare. If we think about an oil producing company, we as a thermal equipment manufacturer, could we think about concepts that we could go into the field and go and execute? And what we had thought about was, look, if we could come up with a list of maybe 5 or 10 gas flare sites, the idea about it, and this time what initiated the concept was that there was a lot of pipeline vandalism that was happening in the country. And we said if we were able to come up with a concept of locating small modular power
Mhm.
plants closer to gas sites, it would avoid you having to invest in building pipeline networks to the power plants where vandalism could take place, a lot of loss could take place, and all of that. And we initiated it. We had picked the AFAM project. I don't know if you guys heard about AFAM. AFAM was supposed to be like our flagship project, even though it's not necessarily located right at the site. It's close by in Okoloma. The concepts around bringing a power plant really close to a gas flare site, it fit the model of what we were trying to do. And the idea for us was if we had a proof of concept, it could be scaled in multiple places. Now, what were some learnings that we had? Idea was really good. The problem about it is in some of these flare sites, you don't have a lot of collection of gas that may justify you putting a large turbine. So it goes back to this capacity. Our turbines play in like 30 megawatt range. In some of these places, the deposits are so small that even if you are able to process the gas, you may not have enough to put a really large turbine there to justify it. Now, it's not saying that there are no solutions, because you could find smaller turbines that are probably less than a megawatt or whatever. But the concept was a really good concept. And it's one that I really do hope maybe from these conversations or following it, we can think about solutions like that. Find flare sites, create a justification to try to put like small modular units that can either capture the flares, convert them, use them for power in the immediate vicinity. If you're able to aggregate them to like large enough quantities, then obviously players like us can come because they're much, much larger. But that's the kind of concept. I think if you think about the root cause, I don't think anyone starts a business with the intention of just wanting to go around and harm society. I think there's a real problem, which is a commercial problem. You need the crude at the bottom of it. There's not a ready market for you to be able to manage associated gas. So what's the easy way to get money? So in my view, when I think of these things, I keep saying it's not a government problem or a private sector problem. I think collectively we need to try and solve the small pockets of problem for every player in it to be able to get a good solution. So I've kind of beat around your
Yeah.
question, but I think there is the proof in the pudding is in the middle of all of that.
Let me push that a little bit further. It's
Please.
like the solar conversation.
Yeah.
Why don't we have solar at the same levels as Germany that has a quarter of the sun radiation that we do?
Yeah.
What you just explained is quite obvious. If you have gas flare and you bring a turbine, you create it and you get that power. Why hasn't that actually worked to the scale it should?
I think because we don't start solving problems thinking at the end. I think everybody starts solving problems for their immediate issue. I'm sure everybody here, if you think about it, my eye just caught one or two key solar players here. But if you look at everybody solves the immediate problem that they have. I don't have electricity. I'm going to find a solution for myself. Or they switch me from band B to band A. I'm not going to spend 2 or 3 times. I'm going to get a solar solution for myself. If we started thinking about creating a solution for the entire sector rather than in individual places, I think that will solve the problem that you have. It's an interesting thing because when I think about you guys in the disco space, I think there's a big problem that's coming that you guys are probably not seeing. And the adoption rate in the renewable, especially because it's not very well coordinated, it's happening at such a fast pace that by the time people realize, you guys are really not even going to have a big business because, so many people are going to realize that they've created their own small pockets in niches. So again, to your question, Emeka, the question that you asked or didn't ask, it's the right thing to do if you start with thinking about how to create a big solution that people can key into. If you allow everyone to create their own solutions, they're not going to be tied, and you just find out that we're beating around and not really solving the key problem.
So shouldn't that be based on government policy? Shouldn't government create the framework to ensure that there's not a lot of clash in that space?
I mean, it's a question I'd really like to ask the gas folks. I like to believe that policies exist. I think the enforcement is what I've really struggled with. I don't think there's proper enforcement. I think policies are created in silos. I don't think there is a holistic view when they create these policies to understand that, okay, as much as you're thinking about something in the oil and gas sector, How does it tie into power? How does, so we have so many policies and bits, but again, there needs to be better job in tying these things and the enforcement of the policies. So I don't think it's a lack of policy. I think it's just the coordination and enforcement. At least that's my view as a private sector player.
No, that's a good point. I think the gas sector in Nigeria, we're going through the decade of gas initiatives, and the Nigeria gas flaring commercialization program were launched with very high expectations. But there's perception that it wasn't as effective, but that's really from a public sector point of view. Dantala, from the work you guys have done, you've been at GACN for a few years now. Could you share a bit about the progress of that work?
So for the Decade of Gas, which Decade of Gas made Nigeria's gas program a national priority as a transition fuel, whereas the NGFCP allowed third-party bidders to commercialize sites. So that tells you that there is a push for a move from flaring. However, they're both important policies, but they've been very slow to implement. So on the gas flare side, you have a pipeline of projects. However, they're still quite very early. You have the financing and also the pre-construction stages. So volumes are not necessarily out yet, which are quite measurable, which is where we generally come in. But we still engage regulators and other industry players to close this gap so that we can commercialize these sites.
But from the regulator's point of view, could you walk us through who actually regulates the gas sectors? There, like on the electricity side, we have NERC, communication has NCC. Who actually regulates the gas?
So for the MIT, you have the NMDPRA, you also have NUPRC. So those are the two bodies now that are the regulators. We're not regulators ourselves.
So you guys are regulators as well?
No, we're not.
Okay. So you have two different regulators who regulate maybe at different points?
So you have the NUPRC for upstream, and then you have the NMDPRA for the midstream, downstream.
Interesting. So I guess from your perspective, has the Decade of Gas been successful?
I think it's in the right place. Like I said, it's slow. So the position of it is right, because you look at the demand, the supply, you look at infrastructure, you look at a variety of things, and it's a national priority. However, like I said, the implementation of it has been slow. So it's in the right place, just moving slow.
Interesting. Okay, that's good to know. I think that's a very important policy, because gas on the power side is 85% of our generation is gas. So we really need to shore that up if we want to grow the sector further. Sherry, I want to come to you around some of these gas pockets that are around, especially in your area of work of ECHO. Are there people who are exploring building potential distribution lines from these sites, like into the places where these floors are being done? Because we hear about some interesting projects in ECHO.
So within ECHO's franchise area, I mean, we do have some IPPs, right? That are pockets of IPPs and all that. And we have some renewable energy pockets as well. Mo mentioned that, and I agree with him, right? This risk has been there for years, really. Even before we all started speaking renewable at the regulators table. But in terms of even just the gas pipelines and even just the flaring, it's not more so within ECHO's franchise area, right? It's more like, down south, in other areas and all of that, right? I mean, but we do understand that even the constraints. We understand the constraints because again, if you even want to get even the gas to these IPPs, right? The gas, even so the associated gas, which is, at least the flared gas. If you even want to get them to IPPs that are not eco-owned, they are not eco-owned, right? You still need the processing plants. You still need pipelines. You still need all these things in whatever capacity. You still need them there. So I mean, the farther it is between where the oil is flared, sorry, the gas is flared, and where it's going to be used to generate into electricity, the farther it is, the longer pipeline you need. So if you either want to take it that way, those essential structures are actually needed. Now, within ECO, we don't deal with that now. ECO is strictly, the parent company is strictly just distribution. But when you even think of maybe like a Sahara, they have the
KGL, right?
Genco, exactly. They have the Genco, they have the distribution. And there are other more parent companies that have Butiscos and Gencos as well, right? So even we look at them to even get lessons learned from them. And we know the struggles they go through instead of even just getting the gas. So yes, are there possible solutions? There are solutions. Is it hard? Yes, it is. But there are possible solutions. And that's where I see most spoke about policies. I've said this I came into the sector 2013. Nigeria is one place that has policies. We have a lot of policies in place and different sectors. We're not, power is not exempt, gas is not exempt. We have a lot of policies. But two things that were mentioned, which I really want to drill on, that overlapping of policies, that must be solved. Because that's the one way where we know that, we understand that there's a proper handshake. I mean, you would see different associations, companies just coming to a standstill.
How would you solve it?
Well, and that's where, right, regulators from the different sectors and the key players need to sit down and kind of look at the overlaps with the policies and then adjust it. So it should, of course, it needs to be looked at from an economic standpoint. You need to take out that power play. That power play must be removed. But they need to sit down and look at it and see where there are overlaps and then define what should be and who should kind of own what part, the accountability within the different policies. That needs to take place. And then the enforcement. But of course, when you look at our culture and you look at some political actions, you see that, again, some policies, even if they've been streamlined, may get halted for political reasons, whatever the case may be. And that affects the entire value chain as well. We can't move away from that. We need to be able to sit down and say, you know what, if we really want this thing to work, the policies that are extinct, get rid of them. The ones that we feel that are still viable, we look at them and clear any overlaps. There can be overlaps, but it needs to be, synergized overlaps and not conflicting at all. And once that is in place, and then the enforcement of the policies. Because again, for anyone that wants to even invest, Mo mentioned, getting turbines as close as possible to where it's being flared. It's investors. Whether it's public-private partnership, it's investors. No investor would step in to any agreement where they look at the horizon and they see things are uncertain. They're not sure what will change tomorrow that would trap their investments. They don't know what regulation will be in place that would just halt them. They don't see even a government stake in the investments. No investor, whether us or foreigners, will not do that. So those are some of the things that we need to fix. It's fixable. It will take willpower to do it from all sides, government, regulators, private, public. It will take that willpower, but we can do it. Okay, thank you.
I want to push back a bit further on that with policies. There's now a new Minister of Gas that wasn't there 5 years ago or 4 years ago. Is there, I guess this is all open to anyone on the panel, is there a handshake between the Ministry of Power, NNPC, Ministry of Petroleum and Ministry of Gas? Because they potentially could have the same policy hang-ups you bring up, because they could have similar policies that kind of contradict one another. Is there a place for a coordinated effort for those three ministries to sit together to be able to drive the power sector forward, especially as it comes to gas?
So I'm sure there is. I am actually downstream. So that collaboration and that sit down will take place mostly upstream with the GenCos, the gas suppliers and all that. So I'm not sure if there'll be gentlemen here will be able to speak to it, but I mean, it is expected that they should be, and that coordination should take place. But I don't have forefront of information on that, but that's the expectation.
So I think, again, I'm sure they have many fora where these sorts of things should be discussed. I'm not a politician. I think from a private sector standpoint, I personally don't see the value in splitting all of those things. I think part of the problem, again, like I had mentioned, is everybody, regardless of how you look at it, is going to be concerned with their own pocket. I think power, oil and gas, all of that stuff, I think if they're treated as one entity, it allows you to think strategically across all the boards. I'm not taking brief for the government, but as a private sector player, the way that I think is solutioning, and the solution is in looking at it holistically. I think if that is the way it is, it makes it very easy, because as you're thinking policy, automatically you're forced to think all through. Being that as it may today, again, I do hope that at the Federal Executive Council or in other fora, there are opportunities. The problem that I have, again, even when we talk about things like the Decade of Gas and the gas flare commercialization program, is where is the accountability and who is driving it? You know, it's easy to say, oh, the execution is slow, but what does that mean? If you asked me today to reiterate what the gas flare commercialization program is, or what does the Decade of Gas means, apart from high level blitz, I really am not able to articulate it. And I'm hoping maybe in the sector they can, but in reality, when these sort of noble ideas are being put together, what is the intent? Is the intent to see it through? And if the intent is to see it through, there needs to be very senior level accountability, maybe all the way even to the president, which means regardless of administration, somebody is driving it and pushing it, because it's very frustrating for investors. It's very frustrating as citizens to see a problem that is really not rocket science and we are unable to solve. So these are the little things that frustrate us in the sector, and I really do hope there is opportunities for dialogue.
Excellent. All right, let's open it up for audience participation for a couple minutes, and then we'll come back to the panel. All right, we're getting the mics over. 1 second. We'll start with the gentleman in the back, and then the gentleman up front, and then and then the lady in the back as well. So we'll take those three questions. Over to you, sir.
Hi, Mo.
Could you please introduce yourself and where you potentially work or what you do, and then your question.
Okay. So good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Komalafe. I'm the CEO of First Electric. We're a solar energy developer based here in Abuja. So my question is more of a comment, right? If I'm to sum up the problem we've discussed in one word, I would say it's a revenue assurance problem. And I would say that because we have an abundant amount of gas. I mean, Mo is able to deploy equipment. I mean, what's the issue here, right? And I would say the issue is we have very limited opportunities to structure really bankable project financed projects in Nigeria. And if, Sherry, I'm happy you're sitting right there. If she gives me a 2 gigawatt take or pay PPA today that is backed by the right financial instruments, within 36 months, we can put additional 2 gigawatts on the grid. And this is a fact, right? So we need to think of how can we solve this liquidity, bankability issue as a sector. And I think if we can solve that problem, it will go a long way in addressing the issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go with, yeah.
Good morning. The name is Chinedu, and I work in the energy sector. So question comes in the form of a comment and a question, right? We've been talking about gas flaring for a long time, and the gas developers will tell you they've reduced gas flaring incredibly, right? And the goal is reduce gas flaring such that you push more gas into the system and have more power generated. Now, with the little gas that is being flared now, I mean, it's uncommon that we're still flaring gas in Nigeria. With the little gas that is being flared now, I understand that this gas is in locations that are not easily converted to where you can just maybe recapture that gas and send build small captive power plants around those areas, because maybe the offtake demand is not there. Most of this gas flaring is in remote locations, right? Now, it comes, we're now looking at maybe a NEP structure that are looking at putting mini grids across different parts of the country. Have we considered a situation where we are also looking at communities that are spread across this gas flaring entities and saying, okay, and this is where the discourse come in. How can we have smaller captive power solutions at those locations? What solutions are we looking at to capture those little gas flaring that is occurring in those areas and utilize them to power those communities? I know there was a time that I and some colleagues tried to deploy such solutions, especially in the Niger Delta. It wasn't commercially viable, right? How do we now resuscitate this discussion with such programs such as NEP that has the financing and could possibly broker such engagements? Thank you.
Thank you. One more in the back.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ezeme Jessica, and I am a technical advisor to the Honorable Minister of Power. Mine is more of a contribution or clarification to the question Emeka asked on, are there forums or platforms where this different sectors, collaborate? And currently we have the Interministerial Power Sector Working Group, which consists of the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Power, the Minister of Gas, Petroleum, Water Resources, all the, connecting ministries. And we actually do meet and discuss issues like this. But like he said, sorry, I can't remember your name, the panelist on the other side. He explained that some of the problems we have is that, implementation is slow, but not that, I'm not a politician, but we are doing as much as we can. Even on the decade of gas, there are, in fact, very good conversations that have happened in the past 1 month. And I'm sure that in the nearest future, something good would come up. But I'm just saying that there are forums like that. And those forums, for instance, the Interministerial Working Group doesn't just consist of the ministers. We also have NMDPRA, we have NUPRC, that's like the agencies of some of these ministries as well. So there's some level of coordination now, I know. I can't speak about the past, but I know that currently we have a certain point of connections. Yeah.
So you're telling us that everything's sorted. We can just stop the panel and go to sleep. Awesome. Let me take the question that Chinedu asked around. There's all these projects that potentially are not commercially viable, but yet again, we're on the renewable side, we're doing mini grid projects with NAP, and all these things cost money. Is there appetite to potentially provide grants and subsidies to make these projects viable from an ESG standpoint point of view? It will reduce the gas flaring, which is actually on the uptick, I think, in Q1. We flared 25% more gas than we did in Q4. So that number is actually going up. Is there appetite to do things like that? And that's for anyone to take up.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't have the. It's a cliche because it ties into a lot of the responses. You know, Daniel talked about what he was summarizing as the issue, which is commercial viability.
Losing
If
out.
it's commercial viable, everything would work. And I think it fits into what Chinedu is saying. I'm laughing at Chinedu because Chinedu has tasted the best of both worlds. You know, he was one leg in before, and now he's one leg out. If you ask me, I think when you're dealing with a problem, it's always important to ask who is the person who is suffering the most from this problem. Yeah. If I owned a business, or let me not say if I owned a business, for someone who owned a gas flare site, again, in their minds, what is their pain point is how to make as much money as they can from the site, right? For the people who are going after crude, they need to just get rid of the gas so that they can get the crude. If there is no incentive to treat or sell the gas, their immediate instant gratification is on getting the crude, right? So there's no incentive for them. If, as a government, your concern is pollution, then the onus really is on you to say, hey, look, you know what? Either I work with this person, or if I have laws, I must enforce it because this guy has no commercial incentive to do the right thing. You know, he's just going to look after his money. But if it's important to me from an environment standpoint or whatever, then I either need to force him to do it, or I need to find a way to do it myself. So the answer lies in between. There needs to be a meeting between where the pain point is and who owns it and who needs to be able to solve it. If there is no commercial viability that makes it a business case, then I think the government needs to find a way to either pick that up or enforce that it's there, or find a way to subsidize it in such a way that somebody who's running a business doesn't see it as an additional pain point because it's a solution that everybody kind of fits into. So commercial viability, I think it's a cliche, it's questionable, you know? I think if there's a business case and if a developer can prove a business case, a bank will lend money to it. And if a bank doesn't, then governments can float infrastructure bonds. I mean, because it is a serious issue that maybe today nobody thinks about it as a money-making venture, but if there's a little incentive either by infrastructure or subsidies, it could be generated in such a way that then somebody could see the commercial viability. So you need to, it's like a chicken and the egg. You need to, somebody needs to do something to allow something to move, you know?
Yeah. So as Blessing said when she was giving her opening remarks, this is the 110th dialogue. The first one was in 2016. And if someone would have sat on this stage and said the World Bank would bring $1.5 billion for the off-grid space to build mini grids, people would have said, how? Not possible. But literally, that has happened in one tranche, and the second tranche with theirs is starting. So government saw the need and said, we must create this renewable energy market. And it's blown up. We have, last time I heard, 300 mini grid developers who are not more than, and probably 80% of them are not more than 5 years old. So it takes a bit of foresight and a bit of like desire to say, I must solve this problem. So I'm just hoping that the government sees this and says, our gas flaring numbers are going up. We've got to set something up to ensure that we're able to address these issues. And I think this commercial giving grants or helping prove the concept to now make it a commercially viable space would be really encouraging, because we're flaring more on pollution, and our net zero by 2060 becomes further and further away. So I'm just hoping that there's something there. Sherry, you have something to contribute?
You know, we're speaking about government and all that, and I totally agree, right? There needs to be that balance and all that, right? And who suffers the most and who's going to gain the quickest and all that. So So this, the midstream, downstream, gas infrastructure fund
Yes, yes.
came into play. That was, PI 2021. And of course, it's supposed to put funding in so that, you know, it can balance out the risk for little projects that kind of want to be in place. But something else, you know, from even just even looking through it or not, something else they do is identify projects. And that's where
Sorry, they identify projects?
yes, they identify kind of projects that, you know, that they're interested in, that they want to fund, whether depending on the finance mix they want to go into, whether it's debt or equity. And so that's just speaking to your question, right? And again, if it's done right, that's where, you know, there's that link with even them trying to improve the carbon footprints of the, you know, of our place, of our little planet here. And just making sure that, you know, gas flaring kind of goes down. So those are the kind of projects that they should be identifying, and I know they're identifying really. And the way they'll actually, I know there's some that they've identified with Afreximbank, where they've identified, and they've actually kind of gone into some kind of financing agreements. Just to make, you know, to de-risk it a bit and just make it more bankable. Because of course, there's that fear of jumping in, right? And I think you mentioned that you are speaking with the DISCO that kind of covers Niger Delta, the Niger Delta. DISCO's right now, as he rightfully said, our current, you know, short-term instant issue is how do we move you from band C to band A? That means you're already on the band. Some of those areas, they are not on the band at all. So, you know, if we're trying to look at that and then you tell me, oh, come, let's look at even that side. Of course, the natural response would be this immediate need here. I need to be able to get my shareholders their value. And the short-term one is to get you from band D to band A, where you're not complaining per se. If you're complaining that I'm on band A because of the price, we're happy. Because you're getting that electricity, that number of hours that we promised you. And that's a different conversation where we are now giving you the 24 hours and because of the price. No, different conversation. But we'll rather that conversation versus saying, you know what, you're not getting the 24 hours. So I think that he rightfully said, so that's where really the government needs to come in and say, you know what, okay, we've pinpointed, you know, some pocket areas, and we actually want to kind of make it more bankable. Yes, there may not be that immediate, you know, that rate of return, you know, return on investment immediately, but we're trying to kind of get either the environment, get, you know, the citizens, get the farmlands to stop getting polluted, to get the pollution in the air to be reduced. So that's where I think government needs to kind of step in. And of course, just like policies, there are so many different projects.
So just to educate us further,
Yes.
who administers and owns this midstream and downstream gas infrastructure fund?
Industry Act.
So is it under Ministry of Petroleum?
Yes.
So those
are the regulators, right? Is that Ministry of Petroleum?
The MDGIL? I'm
Yeah.
not 100% sure who it sits under.
It sits
I'm not 100% sure who
where
it
it's
sits
under.
It's under
Oh,
one of them.
yes. NMPPR.
And because it's from the act itself.
Oh,
Yes.
interesting.
Mhm.
Okay,
Mm.
so that's a potential place.
But yes,
Yeah.
if done right, and just more funds can, I mean, and there are other funds as well, the commercialization of infrastructure for gas flaring, same thing too as well. But if it's done right, if it's done right, because again, if we're just going through a checklist, Nigeria, we got it. Yeah, no, we do. Projects, we have a number of them. But you know what it's supposed to translate to? It is not translating to it, whether a delay, whether something has stalled it and all that. So that translation, that end game is where, you know, our eyes should be on. So whatever is not making it get to that end game is what we should actually, is the bottlenecks we should actually be fixing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, Dantel, speaking on private sector and getting them involved in the in these projects, how's GACN working with the private sector and folks who are interested in developing projects to design frameworks that lower the barrier to entry and make flare to power or flare to market projects viable? I know we've touched on some of this, but if you can just.
Yeah, so our role too is there is just to simplify the risks. So we engage the developers, we engage financiers, we engage the off-takers where we can align risks and incentives. So we also have interest from different financiers who may not necessarily have an asset or anything else, but they have the capital. So they also come in to see where they can plug themselves into any the value chain of gas. So we recognize that there isn't pipeline everywhere, and that some certain sites would require CNG trucking, to evacuate. So on the flare side, I know there were, I think out of 47 sites, there were 42 bidders or thereabout. So we're actually engaging a very small number of them, and what we're looking at is to see if we can start small, and if it's commercially viable, we can then scale up, and that's it. And with how things work here as well, you always look for somebody to get things moving before others then buy into or key into it. So I think that's where we are right now with that.
Interesting. Has government identified flaring as a big issue? Is it something that's like on top of mind?
It's not on top, however, it is on our radar.
Interesting. Let's go back to the audience for some more questions. I see a question here, one here.
All right, thank you very much. My name is Idris. I'm the Senior Energy Economist for the Nigerian Governors Forum. So I'll just like to make my own contributions around some of the questions that have been asked. So even before I joined the Nigerian Governors Forum, so it happens to be one of those on the side of the private sectors who has engaged in the gas flaring projects, because there was a time we won the license from the NMDPRA at the time. So just to show that even the private sectors are already playing in that situation. And I think at the time, it was some of the fields for Health Energy, HHOG, were the ones we were trying to. So I understand that some of these sites are quite far from so what we tried to do then was to say, okay, let us convert this flaring gas to a CNG or an LNG. We have two sites we're trying to look at the time, and one we're trying to do for LNG, and we're also trying to. So with that, we can easily transport that, which makes it a kind of viable for us as a company under EPC at the time in Lagos. So it makes it kind of viable for us. So what we just tried to do was convert those gas to LNG or PNG. So when we try to convert it to LNG, we can as well access the fund under the NMDPRA as well, because those are part of the things that they try to fund. So those are some of the things that we can as well leverage. And in terms of maybe whether government can, maybe it's something that is on top of their mind. At least sometimes last year, when I was doing training for some of the executives of the NNPC, at least they mentioned that, okay, the flaring has reduced to less than 10%. So, which was what they said. Yeah, but at the same time, at least if you see some of the steps that I've taken, even right then, in terms of having different private sectors to come in and ensure that, they take some of these licenses and convert them. So we just have to find a way. So I think the only problem there is maybe if there's some other kind of funds that can be made available just to subsidize some of these things for the private sector, so that it could be easier for them as well. I think that way, yeah, everything will just works perfectly.
Interesting. So I think your point around creating gasification plants at the gas flaring sites Mo, from conversations you've had, is that commercially viable, or does that depend on the sites?
I think commercially viable will depend on the site. You know, I mean, just listening to you, I was thinking, right? You know, I told you that there are multiple ways to think about this. This is a funding issue in the context that if you are sure you spent the money and you would make money, everybody will be running in there.
Definitely.
The problem is nobody is certain that if they spend the money, they'll make their money. So we now have to ask, okay, how then do you solve the problem? So there may be some sites that probably have very large deposits that it's so easy that if you know that, look, if you invested maybe 100 million, you'll be able to get maybe 100 million SCOFs that would justify that. For these small remote sites that clearly don't have the commercial viability for a private individual, I think some ways to do it could either be a partnership with the government, right? I think if the government, even if they don't give you a subsidy, if they say something like, okay, look, you know what, you invest the money in building the processing, we will give you a 20-year PPA to say everything you get from there, because you have invested this money, we will purchase it from you. It's not the government's business to do it, but that incentive at least allows an investor to say, look, you know what, because of that, I will throw money. It's almost like the way they're doing this tax rebates on building roads. I think we as government, or we as people, need to start thinking creatively around where there isn't readily money, what else can we structure? I think a structure like that, if a government says, look, you know what, it's not my business to buy gas, but if you build this thing, I will purchase all your gas as an incentive for you to invest that money. I think those sorts of creative thinking are the sorts of things that allow you to solve problems in these sorts of remote areas. So for the government folks who are there, this is the sort of creative thinking that I'm hoping we can all sit on the table to try to get to. You know, it's not conventional, but it could work.
You've said the very interesting S word, subsidies, right?
Yeah.
Once that conversation starts, then we kind of lose. I think there's a bit of people are not as serious because they feel like they're not in a commercially viable place. But the instruments you just mentioned around doing a 20-year PPA and tying them in where they're not getting cash from government, but they're getting more or less a payment guarantee that they'll buy the power, that could potentially work.
It's the same problem in the power sector, right? So in the power sector, there are lots of people who want to build power plants to help. But again, same chicken and the egg situation. Nobody wants to go and invest $1 billion in building a large power plant, and then you tell them, well, you now need to go and find customers who you're going to sell it to. I mean, as a commercial case, that's the right thing to do. But if you're solving a problem, you can't only think commercially. There needs to be a bit of social thinking. So again, like I'm saying, it could be on a case-by-case basis, but if it's an important problem that we see, at least on the government and country end, we all need to be willing to think a bit creatively in certain cases to solve it.
Yeah, I think one of the members in the audience mentioned revenue assurance as the biggest challenge, both on the gas side and also down to the consumer side with the discos. I guess, Sherry, from your perspective as a disco, looking at how the market is structured, is revenue assurance, let me ask this a different way. There's a big issue now in the sector around gas debts, right? Down to generation and all of that. And the conversation is the discos are not doing what they're supposed to do to remit enough money back because of revenue assurance issues from all the different losses. From an average Nigerian's perspective, the conversation is, why are discos not remitting money back? But we know in the sector that it's because people are not paying their bills and their losses that are happening. What are the discos doing to ensure revenue assurance occurs at their end to pull up the entire value chain?
Okay, thank you. I'll toot our horn again. As the best disco in Nigeria, as the best disco in Nigeria, with the mission to be the best disco in West Africa and then Africa.
Wow, okay.
Well, I say that to start my response because at least Eco Disco pays 100% to the markets, and I say that confidently. Right, we pay 100% to the markets. We pay 100% of our bills. Okay. And
Across the board?
oh yeah, we get 2 bills and we pay it, yeah. And it should, well, it trickles down down the lane. Now, we have 10 other discos, right? And I am very much aware that of course they are not able to pay 100%. So yes, as much as we pay 100%, right? When you look at the average, then when we speak as and if I'm here speaking as a disco, then yes, we're not paying 100% and all that. I mean, why is that? Yes, you did mention about because people are not paying their bills. And some of the things that we need to put in place, which ECO has and other discos should do as well. Well, first thing again, he said revenue assurance, right? For you to dig into revenue assurance, you need to know where your power is going to. You need to know at least, yes, you're not necessarily happy with the quantity of power you're getting, but at least the one you're getting, where is it going to? And that's where we need to start. And that's where the whole energy accounting comes in and all of that. As we have our franchise areas, you know, it's kind of cut up into different zones or districts as it may be. But in terms of that energy accounting, when you do that energy accounting, you know which feeders it's going to, you know which transformers it's going to. And that revenue assurance comes in place where if I've given you whatever megawatts, kilowatts of power, then I expect this amount of money. Right, so this is even just us granular with the customers. And for us to even know how much we've given you, apart from what we bill you on your bill, we need to know this is the amount that we've injected into this area. And so this is the amount that we need to get. Energy accounting, well, we're fencing different areas to make sure that, you know, we actually get it right. And so that energy accounting has to take place. For energy accounting to take place, of course, we need, well, different structures, your statistical meters, meters that feed us, DTs, and of course, which of course will eliminate the estimated billing. But again, that's for a different panel. But that energy accounting is key. And once we kind of have a hold on that, then we can start really having that proper dialogue saying, okay, if I injected this amount, this is the amount that I should get back. And once that is done, and we get, then of course, paying back into the market should not be that difficult, you know, taking other issues out of play. But when you look at it from that value chain, when we get the power, we inject it in, we need to know what we're injecting into our different smaller franchise areas. And so when we get the money back, we're comparing apples to apples versus injecting it blindly and then just hoping we get as much as we can get. And then so that's where, you know, when he says revenue assurance, that kind of touches that on them.
I can't stop myself. I have to ask you this question.
Don't go test me to billion. Go ahead.
Publicly, there's a perception. Actually, let's do a poll. Who here believes that discos don't want to meter customers? Do not want to meter customers? Oh, wow.
I like this. Thank you very much.
Wow.
Thank you, audience.
So in my very interested mind, I don't think discos really have the incentive to meter customers. And some discos say, of course they do, but we privatized in 2013 and we run 5 metering schemes and for government has, and it quite hasn't worked.
So, I mean, so I work in this space, so I fully understand the issues that we face. I really do. And it's frustrating for all of us. But I like the fact that out of 30, only 3. No, that, yes, but there are different issues, right? And I'll just listen to about 3 or so. We want to meter customers. we do want to meet the customers. It's less headache for us. But remember, I speak for ECO, but I think I speak for all of the discourses. We want to meet the customers. There are a couple of issues. One, we have, the gentleman there said that if we give him a PPA, he'll get it done in 36 months. We get a lot of people speaking that. So applying it to even metering, we have a number of vendors that would come and tell us we can meter, we have meters, we have meters. Now, the meter application process starts. Customers apply. Customers are the ones actually paying for meters, then we refund them.
Mm-hmm.
Time to install the meter. The meters don't stay with us, they stay with the vendor. And we get major delays from the vendors. Their meters are still at the ports. The meters still need to be cleared. The meters have not come in as yet. We get that. Do you care that is the vendor? No. You just care EcoDisco has not metered and they've taken our money.
So you're saying
get
that
that.
Nigerians are holding back Nigerians?
Say that again?
Nigerians are holding back Nigerians, not the
But keep in mind, it's not intentional. It's not intentional. And that's where, everybody needs to come in. Something's going on at the port, they've downed their tool, whatever it is. So it's not intentional. But these are actual issues that takes place. Real life. I'm not calling any vendor's name, but real life in EcoDisco. I get so many calls. Yes, I'm audit and compliance, but the number of customers that have my number is tremendous. So you have that issue. And then you have another issue, with the schemes that you mentioned. You have the issue of even identification of your customers. When you push out installers, you have an issue of, okay, is Street Lagbaja really Street Lagbaja written there? So that KYC is another problem. That KYC is another problem. Because yes, Street Lagbaja is what is maybe in our billing system, but by the time you get there, you are seeing streets equally. And so since you have these installers that are coming from vendors going out, they may not necessarily know that. So that KYC of, because that issue is also there. And of course, you have the few naughty actions and all that, but it is minority in the whole scheme of things. Now, when we meter, it helps us because one, you're paying, you're already paying us up front for what you use. So it helps us. Now, of course, the other aspect which I think some discos, that we need to pay attention to is when we meter, now there's accountability of energy. That delta, we need to be thinking ahead. Because of course, when you meter at the injection substation and you have customers that are metered, you may have a delta.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do there? So that's where you need to start combing and understanding where there's leakages and all of that. That we need to put in place. But to your question, no, we actually want to meter. We really want to meter. And there are just some factors that are kind of slowing it down a bit. Some discos are ahead of others in terms of metering. But on average, we do want to meter. There are some issues. And the good thing about it now, we actually change meter vendors every 2-3 months. So by the regulators, they actually approve the meter vendors. Is it good short term? Yes. Long term, of course. I'm a risk thinker. So, where people take advantage of processes and mechanisms in place. There can be issues there, but hopefully we'll actually put controls that would actually stop people taking advantage of, having the same vendors or having vendors that we know cannot cannot perform. Because again, that's one of the things that we hold the carrot and stick. If you're not able to meter these customers that we've given you, that you've collected money for, the next time that the bidding process comes up, your name is actually excluded. So it helps. That's helping right now. But we do have backlogs. Not to say, ECO has some backlogs which we're working on, and I can imagine other discos have wider backlogs. But the intent is there, and hopefully action will meet up with intent to get everybody to see that we want to meter and we're metering.
Interesting.
Yes.
All right. I apologize for that tangent, but this is a conversation we've been having for a bit. Mo, just a quick question on technology. Revenue assurance was mentioned, and there's this number that we're talking about, 4 trillion, as being owed to Gencos and gas suppliers. And there's been some questions how valid that number is, and I'm not really getting into the specifics of the numbers. What I'm trying to query is what technologies are set in place to check and to measure what actually gets to the Genco and then what actually gets further down to the grid.
Again, I'm not an operator, so I would not be the best person to respond to that. I can just tell you about my own baseline knowledge. So I think there are meters that are put in place across the board, right? So even from the generating plant, there are meters that make you realize exactly how much power you're sending into the grid. In the true sense, I think on the transmission system, if you did have some sort of a communication SCADA system, you should be able to understand and read what is coming in and what is going out. I think on the distribution side of things, they also have some sort of metering that tells them what they're getting off the transmission system. In the perfect world, outside of AT&C losses or whatever you're putting in is what you're getting out. I mean, it's electricity, right? Everything you generate, apart from losses, you should receive on the other end. So there are technologies to be able to handle all of that. I think part of the problem consistently also is that the system is not necessarily as linked as you would like it to be. I think that gap in the SCADA, which is basically taking from the generators to the distributors, there's a lot of losses that come from that. On the distributing side, from what they receive to dispersing and everything, there's a lot of losses. So the ability to put the right sort of metering, the ability to have systems that can connect and communicate with one another, I think it's a non-starter for running an efficient power system. So there is technology that exists. Whether we're utilizing it and the right way, I think, is a different question.
Interesting. All right, let me go back to another round of questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand. And from Annie, as you had the red hat.
Thank you. Idahosa Akpata from 87 Engineering. This is going to Sherry. I know she has hyped EcoDisco, but although I think that the reason I would have raised my hand up, but I think what had switched the conversation from them not wanting the estimated bills is the fact that they now have it's a similarly more cost-reflective tariff and everything. I don't think if that was in place, I think it would have been a good thing to be on the estimated side. But apart from that, EcoDisco often faces constrained capacity and billing challenges. What specific commercial tariff mechanisms could EcoDisco offer to reliably offtake power from small gas to power plants fed by captured flare gas?
Could you could you say that question again?
Okay.
Sorry.
I said EcoDisco often faces some challenges like constrained capacity. Well, more in
Constrained capacity.
Yeah, we can look at it more from the infrastructure side and billing challenges. What specific commercial or tariff mechanisms could EcoDisco offer to reliably offtake power from small gas to power plants fed by captured flare gas? Although she had also mentioned something, well, in passing about ECO-owned IPPs. How is that synergized? For example, if we bought an anchor customer, what paperwork and timeline are we looking at per se?
Okay. Thank you for that. We've got one more question in the blue shirt.
All right, thank you very much. So I just wanted to ask questions around the metering testing that you mentioned. I noticed that you highlighted some of the challenges that you as a DISCOs are facing in terms of So I just wanted to know what other things or what other kind of vendor or business model arrangements you've put in place to ensure that, okay, the challenges are there. Of course, one of the reasons why we have challenges is to also find a way to come up with an innovative way to solve that solution. So what other things have you guys put in place? Because if you really want to tell us that the discos are much interested in mentoring everybody, so we need to sort of understand what you guys are putting in place aside from the government interventions or whatever it is. So let us know what you guys are putting in place to ensure, because metering is one of the major aspects to ensure that, so we just want to know maybe what you guys have put in place generally to solve those challenges and ensure that everybody is metered.
And I apologize for delaying us this metering conversation. Let's pick that one up. Are there any other questions before we come back to the panel? All right, great. So maybe you can just address the metering question and then we can move on.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I'll bring us back to. So in terms of metering again, I speak for EcoDisco. We're at a good place when it comes to metering and all that with this challenge. So when I was speaking about metering, I was not even talking about the government schemes at all. The government schemes are just more complementary to what we have in place and all that. So of course there are different funding mixes when it comes to metering. I mean, metering is not free for anyone and all that. From the meter itself to even the installation, and the accessories, it's not free. So of course you have we have, even whether it's 100% funded by the discos, to whether it's a partnership between the discos and the vendors that put the money in place, and then we come up with how they will get the funding back. They are 50% or whatever reach back to them, and then you have the other one when it has to do with customers pre-funding, and then customers now get their funds back, through credits and all that. So again, these are just more in-house and not kind of government funded or government sponsored and all that. So I mean, there are different things. Now again, I speak for EcoDisco. I don't know for other discos as well, but I know, I mean, Ikeja too has some other more funding mixes as well, in order to get their metering in place. Related to, I think you mentioned the IPPs, and so I think your question was more, how long would it take if an IPP kind of came on board? Operationalize. Okay. So with that, I mean, I would actually leave that. You can come and get my card, and I can link you up with our legal team and our we have a power procurement team and all that, so I kind of will deal with that. But of course, I mean, one size does not fit all, depending on what you're bringing in place, depending on, I mean, the different factors and all of that. Okay, thank you.
All right, great. To kind of bring us back to the topic at hand, during the pre-work for this session, we looked at the different countries that flare gas the most. And it's not surprising that Nigeria is in the top 10%, actually top 10 globally for countries that flare gas. And interestingly enough, the rest of the countries that do flare gas, United States, Russia, Iran, Iraq, Algeria, Mexico, Libya, Venezuela, and Nigeria, that as a list. Most, if not all of them, have 100% electricity access or close to it. We're at 50%. We're still struggling to find our way out of this conundrum. So maybe, Dantara, from your perspective, what are the 3 or so things that the government can do, or government, private sector, or any interested party can do to help solve this challenge?
So firstly, the government and industry can accelerate the completion of midstream while still using modular strategies such as the trucking and CNG. That's one. 2 would be blended financing, so government and financiers, which would be blended finance, where you also get investors to come in and complete or at least for the payment to alleviate the bills for the government. And lastly would be strengthening market signals through level pricing and regulations. I think those are things that would also help unlock a lot of the issues we're facing right now. Also keep in mind that it's a new territory for us as well. So we're learning as we're going in this space as well.
The trucking CNG is one that the infrastructure is not quite there from as far as the road setup and all of that. Are there other places that have set a CNG system up that has worked? I'm just, if you know any other top of your head.
So again, look at this case by case. So not everything is pipeline, not everything will be CNG, mini LNG. You have to look at what fits best there. That's what I would say with that.
Okay. Then I guess from the work I've done in the sector, from Ministry of Power to next year to the various programs, NIAF and MPSP that I've worked on quite closely, there's always been this conversation around gas pipelines get vandalized because they're running parallel with oil pipelines. And there's this unexplored field of non-associated gas. I know there are cost constraints in exploring those fields. Is that something that's already happening with the new act, or is that something that's still not really being touched?
So with the non-associated gas fields, what we actually did, and it's still ongoing right now, is let us study more or less. It's just because you find a lot of developers don't want to develop assets where you don't have any offtake or any bankable solution around you. So it's more or less just there. So what we did is that we just off the books, we also did with an external company, we did a study more or less. And so that's something which is ongoing, and the report actually has been sent up to the EVP's office as well. So we'll get a further stare on that.
Awesome. Because I think that one of the reasons gas is flared sometimes is because when pipelines are broken, people kind of do what they need to do to get rid of the gas. Let me come back to the audience for the last time, trying to make this as interactive as possible. Before we come back to the panel, any more questions? Wow. All right, awesome. So Mo, a question around if Nigeria is to fast track flare to gas, what immediate steps should be taken? And I know Dantala has already mentioned some of these, but what immediate steps should be taken from a private sector point of view to ensure that capture gas translates to reliable electricity on the grid?
I wouldn't, I don't think I'll ever have any options that is just private sector standalone. I think all the options are going to, I'll answer the question a different way. I'll give some ideas of some steps that could be taken, and then whether it's government or private sector, I think we can always decide. And I'll piggyback on what Dan had already said. If costing was not an issue, and I'll use that as my disclaimer because we've found out that costing is obviously the underlying thing. So if costing was not an issue, I think the deployment of modular flare catchers, which are basically equipments that you put in a few of these gas flare sites that trap the gas, treats the gas. I think those are some immediate things that could be utilized, in the short term. The gas that is gotten from those, however small, can be used for power production in the immediate vicinity if it's an industrial zone. If it is much larger, it can obviously be sold to the grid. And that's a first step. Now, if the quantities of gas are much more than these small pockets, then working with either the gas aggregators or whatever, investment needs to go in creating the right sort of pipeline network to aggregate this gas for much larger treatment. Now, in much larger treatment areas, obviously you can also then have larger power plants that can either feed larger industrial zones or can go back to the national grid. Also from these aggregated areas, you could work with mini LNG, mini CNG to work on virtual pipelines. Again, if these are remote sites, using these trucking systems, you can be able to move this gas pipeline, the molecules to much larger areas. I think all of these will apply to onshore assets. If you have offshore assets, then obviously they have like the FSRU, the floating storage units that you can use similar technologies on those to be able to treat offshore gas flaring sites. So in my mind, when I think solutioning, I think if costing was not an issue, and we've talked about the different bottlenecks around costings, these are a few technologies that could be deployed remote areas, larger congregational areas, offshore areas in solving this problem. And again, it is my hope that collaborating either within the private sector or the government, we find ways to execute these sorts of things. That would be the sort of thinking that I have.
You mentioned virtual power plants and
virtual pipelines.
Virtual pipelines.
Correct.
Could you explain to the audience what that means?
So it's a fancy word, right, that we use in the industry. It's basically saying if you don't have a physical pipeline, how can you move products from A to B? And there's a company, Greenville. Greenville is doing some great jobs. You know, they have like storage units where they have either LNG or whatever, and they have trucks and they move it from where they have it to areas that don't exist. So it's a virtual, meaning it's not a physical pipeline, but you have a system in place that either through trucking, you're able to get molecules from one place to the other. So that's the concept of it.
That's interesting. These modular flare catchers, are they in use anywhere else in globally, or where they use?
I think even here, some of these, I mean, they're fancy units. Some of these are fabricated units in the oil and gas sector. I don't think it's not foreign. I think the question again is more around the commercial viability for you to build something. Where does the cost come and how do you recoup the cost? So it's not groundbreaking. It's not a revolutionary concept. It's just, it has to be deployed. So there are places I would like to think they have a few of those in deployment here, even in the country.
Interesting. Sherry, just based on your experience, what are the actionable steps again around that can be taken to, because obviously this is the power dialogue. We care about the solving the power issues. So from your perspective, what can, and as gas flaring is concerned, what do we need to do to get more gas onto the grid and like solving the gas flaring issues?
I think apart from what they've said and all that, you can't take away that that costing part of that commercial area of it and all that, because again, even the government will want something if they do themselves 100%. So I mean that costing part is there. However, I mean other things that we know we can do as both public and even private, right? Is even just sitting down, even looking at the energy transition plan, and just looking at it to see how even the gas flaring can actually synergize into it. I mean, there's so many benefits that we can get from that. Yeah, the energy transition plan, tries to decarbonize, wants to decarbonize the energy, the energy that we get. So of course, that's an advantage that that stands up to gain. However, even with that, when you mix in the renewables and we sit at the table to talk about renewables and how the gas flaring can go down, it is going to be a beautiful mix if we can achieve this. So sitting down to even speak about it and implementing it, right? Implementing the energy transition plan, the climate change act, which is part of it, and even just trying to understand how, that future foresight to see, okay, if we're going to utilize renewable, we can definitely utilize gas where that renewable resource is not available. Solar, of course, at night, there's no solar available there. So that's when big gas can come in. And where everybody can get that energy security and reliability across Nigeria. That would actually be helpful there. I mean, other areas, of course, vandalism, that needs to be fixed.
How do you solve that?
That's where really the government needs to come in with regulations, with stiff sanctions, with stiff penalties. The government needs to come in there. I mean, again, so that even fixing that actually gives stakeholders, gives private entities more confidence to actually invest. If they know that they're going to invest, build costly, expensive pipelines, and then people, whenever or from wherever, would come and vandalize. Nobody wants to lose their money. Nobody wants to go into any market not being sure whether their costly asset will be safe. Because at the end of, and nobody even wants that when it's vandalized, oh, you now have to start negotiating with the government on who to fix it, how to fix it. No. So the government needs to do that. And now, as he said, right, where they'll need right now, I don't foresee, I can't imagine a partnership with, private and public when it comes to securing the pipelines, but I'm sure there is. And that's where, in terms of even just competency and all that, I'm sure there is, right? Where you can actually come together and kind of put frameworks in place and put some mechanisms in place to protect that, to protect the pipelines and even other processing plants, right? So other areas that we need to even look into is even capacity building, really, capacity building. I mean, R&D, ESG, you mentioned, ESG. I mean, even this modular, the fancy modular plants, again, I'm not in that upstream space. But in terms of even just maintaining it, supporting it, and all of that, all of us here at one time or the other, although we should be spanking ourselves, right? We all say that Nigeria's culture has poor maintenance. So we have these beautiful modular, modular turbines and on whatever, and the different equipments there. But we need people to be able to maintain it, repair it, and all of that. So the different competencies are needed, and that's where to me we need to just start growing them. Because if we actually have to bring in foreign, the foreign personnel, there's nothing wrong with that. But that also just builds the cost, and then of course, when it comes to even the return on investment, you're looking at something higher versus if you're looking kind of at local talents, right? It is a little bit more manageable. So I think competency, there's a gap for competency that just needs to be filled around that. I spoke about the energy transition plan and then just synergizing it. We spoke about policy overlaps. That also needs to be fixed, right? Is it doable? Yes, it is. But that also needs to be fixed so that we're all speaking the same language and we're all looking at the same vision. And then, yes, he mentioned that I think it was Mo, I can't remember who mentioned it, but in terms of most people are in it for the profit and then for the people next. But that is where, I mean, we must realize that that's where either the government or whichever development banks come in and say, you know what, this is the way they're stepping in to identify locations where it's more of the people and the environment versus the profits. They identify it and they make it attractive to other potential investors to come in. And so doing that makes it more bankable, makes investors actually want other potential investors looking in to make sure that, okay, if this is happening and it works and investors get environment is healing, the farmlands are healing, then you'll actually see more investors going into it. Okay.
That's quite interesting. I think what we've kind of unpacked is the gas flaring is it happens. People are not rushing to the space because of the commercial viability conversation, and there are not enough programs. There's a few that we've unpacked, but they're not going to be that that euphoria where everyone enjoys a space where they see that they cannot get into the space. So that limits who people who actually want to get into the space and all of that. But I think from the energy transition point of view is a plan that Nigeria has to be net zero by 2060. And we also have the plan around by 2030 to be 30% renewables on grid. We also have other plans that say set very aggressive goals. So maybe just to get us out on this one before the closing is, these plans that are in place, how do we ensure, how do we help government set realistic goals to get things done? Are there pathways of maybe advising government or maybe suggesting to the people who are making these policies that, for instance, the 2030 goal with 30% renewables was done 15 years ago, and 10 years later, we have maybe a few megawatts that are renewable that are on the grid. So is there ways to help government avoid falling into some of these traps?
2030, 2060, I think that came from the Paris, well, I'm sure it stemmed from the Paris Agreement, where different nations came together to, to target, to put together some of these targets and all that. And Nigeria was one of the countries, of course. That, of course, as when you have objectives from your stakeholders, it transcends to management and then employees and departments and all that. So I think that is kind of how this one came about. However, for the regulators, which is NERC, we do sit down, we talk about, the different targets that they put in place. We do sit down with the Ministry of Energy, both from the federal level and the state level, to even just kind of look at the targets. And we kind of meet with periodically to kind of assess milestones, achievements, and any obstacles that actually comes into place. And where they need to adjust, they will adjust. Where they need to step in to clear some bottlenecks, they actually would do that. Where we actually have alternate solutions, we actually put that forth as well. So I mean, I wouldn't necessarily give you a yes, we would hit it by 2030, because you do need to look at it from a country standpoint, and there are different key players within that space. But I think, to be fair, a number of countries across the globe that went into the Paris Agreement are struggling a bit. I mean, it's amazing where you see 2030 is just 5 years from now, and you look at where you are. So I mean, we're no exception.
Yeah, and also I think with leadership's change, countries kind of pivot. If we look at what's happening in the US with they're essentially rolling back all their renewables to go back to coal, which we know is more expensive, and we know that it's not sustainable and has different issues. Right. So I think that really varies based on governments. But I guess what our hope is that we as a country can realize that solar and renewables are important, but from the approach of how do you actually make them financially viable, we're still trying to understand that question. But I think that's why something this gas issue would be, the gas would lead it as a transition flow, as it's supposed to. Dantala, any last comments for your closing remarks? We'll just go down the panel.
For me, I think just more emphasis on the partnerships. So I think this will be able to, we'll see clear headway with, government, investors, and just industry players are able to align, like I had mentioned earlier on, how we tend to work on things in silos. We don't necessarily, it's not until afterwards we then see, this could come in, this could come in. I think just having that alignment, I feel will be a big step in the right direction.
You mean alignment across?
Across the government, investors, and industry players.
Is your current forum that all these parties meet?
More just other, I mean, you have them annually, but however, it just the focus is not that.
Oh, okay. Mo?
This is not the wrap, right? This is more so to the question, or is this my wrap?
Both.
Okay. So let me just coin it as a wrap. I think, again, interesting discourse. I'd like to see a lot more action. I think there are multiple forums. There's the Nigerian International Energy Summit. We have a lot of forums, and it's the same thing. You know, we do a lot of talking. We need a lot more action. Again, like I said, regardless of how we look at it, you picked on some themes. We're top 10 when it comes to glass flaring. Actually, that top 10 accounts for even more than 75% of the gas flaring globally that happens. I know there's some question of whether it's been reducing in Nigeria or not. I know from last year, it actually has started increasing all over again. We need honest accountability from ourselves, private sector and stakeholder players and the government. These solutions are not impossible, but we need genuity of intent in trying to solve them. We talk about programs like the Decade of Gas. We talk about programs like the Nigerian Flare Gas. If we really want to hit net zero by 2060, we can draw up a roadmap and have credible projects every year that we try to tackle to ensure that we're going towards that target. If not, it's business as usual, you know? Again, from a private sector standpoint, capital will always move to the path of least resistance. Yeah. There are multiple areas where investors have to spend their money. If this is a problem that we have in the sector, in the country, we have to make it attractive enough for investors to bring their money to come over here. So it's a problem that is a social problem. It's a problem that's an investor's problem. We need to find that middle ground to be able to create the right enabling environments to attract investment, to be able to solve this problem, you know? Again, my shameless plug is going to be, you know, I work with GE Vernova. We have technology that can be utilized once this gas is processed to be able to solve a more pressing issue, which is this energy access and availability. And I'm more than happy to engage in conversations across board with like-minded individuals who are thinking about the right way to solve this problem. I think it is solvable. It starts from conversations like this, and I'd like to thank you guys for hosting and the rest of the panel. And I really do hope we'll be able to take this conversation to action. So that would be my summary and parting words.
Sure. Before I come to Sherry, let me just ask you one question around, you've been with GE for at least a decade, right?
I've been in GE for a minute, more than a decade, but I've gone across multiple sectors. Yes. Yeah, so I have experience in the oil and gas sector, in the transportation infrastructure space, and power with GE.
Excellent. So just as the CEO and the president of GE Vernova, are there companies who have interest in this particular conversation that we're having?
Every company that we play with has an interest in this space, you know, because again, we're in the business of selling power. Yes, we generate turbines, but nobody just goes to buy a turbine to look at it. They're trying to solve a power issue. And in solving a power issue, gas is a fundamental part of that value chain that has to be solved. So I would like to believe everybody in the sector has an interest in this topic.
And they haven't moved ahead to gather and produce on site because of cost.
Well, if we take Chinedu, for instance, right? So what you find with a typical investor in the space is, as much as you would like to do this, if you feel that the commercial viability doesn't make sense, you either pivot to something that's an easier low-hanging fruit or not. It doesn't change the fact that we have a pressing problem around energy access that somebody needs to solve. It may not be us because of instant gratification, but whoever unlocks it, it'll be better for everyone, you know, and that is the problem statement on the table.
Thank you. Chair, over to you.
I think I'll just end with how I started. solving it helps everyone really, and it really helps from, from the SDG standpoint. I said it at the beginning, I'm saying it again. It touches on about 7, 8 goals, which deals with us as a people, us as a planet, us as the environment, including communities. It touches on all of that and touches on that negatively now, but of course has that positive impact there as well. And so it's something that we should be talking about, and everybody has kind of a hand to play in this with. And I look forward to us really solving it. We solve this, and we use that same framework to solve other things. We have a lot of policies, we have a lot of frameworks, funding schemes, we have a lot of, schemes across, but doing it right, implementing it right, and ensuring that it meets that end objective, taking the lessons learned and applying it to the next scheme, removing all selfish intents and intentions is key. We have to do this for us. We have to do this for us. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just leave with these 2 comments before I go through the quick recap. 30 years ago, so there were no cell phones in Nigeria, maybe a few. 30 years later, there's 600 million phones in Africa. Nigeria has 200 million of them. So a sector grew overnight, and they met the Nigeria that we've all met, figured out a pathway to make it work, and they've been able to solve their issue and thrive and grow and expand. The power sector is in the same place where we just need to solve this issue, because once we do, the growth opportunities are immense. Last example, if we look at MoneyPoint and OPay, 7 years ago, no one knew who they were, but now they're both billion-dollar firms. So the point here is governance and policies and all these things are challenges. But as this panel has identified, if you're able to create a revenue assured situation, people will come in to put their money because they know they can get headed out. And I think when I look at the gas flaring issues, there's so many ways to tackle it, but we just have to start to do and agree on a framework and start projects in order to grow, in order to make a pilot case, prove that concept works, and then hopefully scale it. Right now, I know there are some programs that are out there, but I don't know if they're going to go to the scale that is required. One of the things is just this interministerial conversation that the TA to the minister confirmed that's been happening recently. So hopefully there'll be more progress and more conversations in that space. I would love to see a scenario where we check back at the end of Q1 next year. We see the numbers have actually dipped as opposed to the uptick they have over the past 6 months or so. But on behalf of next year and TH, thank you, panelists, for coming. I know some of you came far and wide to be here, and it's Wednesday, middle of the week. Everyone's busy, so thank you for spending time with us. Let me call on the TH team to give the closing remarks.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming for this edition of the Power Dialogue. I hope you enjoyed it, and we look forward to having you at the next dialogue session too. So if you have if you want to communicate with us in regards to this Power Dialogue or subsequent ones, you can just send us an email or reach any one of our team. Thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate you. Thank you.